Hi everybody and welcome back to the watercolor channel, and in today's episode I'm going to be painting something that I thought my American subscribers would really appreciate, and that is one of their native terns feeding in the waters off of Florida. So let's roll the intro and let's see how we get on. Welcome back everybody. Now I do an awful lot of birds on my channel, as you all well know, but they are all British birds. So I felt this week it'd be really lovely to think of all my American subscribers and do a bird that is native to their shores. Now a few years ago I used to do a lot of shows in America, and I had lots of occasions to visit places like Florida. And one of the places I just went straight to was Sanibel and Captiva Islands. Now on Sanibel there is a stunning reserve called Ding Darling, and if you're ever in the area and you're a birder, it's a must go-to place. I tell you, you would be crazy if you didn't go there. But this is one of their terns on the beaches, feeding off the beaches. So without further ado, let's get on. Hi everybody and welcome. I am so looking forward to painting this lovely tern from Florida in the USA. Now I'm using some masking fluid and I'm decanting some into a little medicine measuring cup, and I've got another one standing by with some washing up liquid in that. Now if you're going to use a brush, use an old one and literally coat it in dish soap first and then dip it into your masking fluid. And I'm just going over this. Now the drawing has already been put on, and the line art as well as all the references are on my Patreon for you to pop over and download for free of charge so that you can do your version of this painting. So I hope you do that, and hey, as I say before, if you like what you see on Patreon, you might want to get involved. But there's, in addition to the brush, I also use one of these long family safety matches. Now that will give you a whole set of different marks. A brush can be soft and give you certain type of marks, but you can scratch around with a rigid object like a little long match. But if you want to do more, then use an old toothbrush and you can make some lovely splatters across the scene, lovely little lights of splashing waters, all that sort of thing. And that's exactly what I did. The brushes I'm using are Rosemary & Company Red Dot. Don't forget, if you put Paul Apps unbroken capitals in the affiliate link tab when you go to order, if you want to order some, you'll be helping me out, and I will thank you very much for that. Now my color mix is over the whole thing. Well, I'm working on top to bottom. I'm working on all the sea. I've got a lovely set of Cobalt Blue with a little bit of Magenta into that to give it a little violet flush. As it comes down, I'm keeping that bead very, very active. It really is important. The paint surface is very wet, but if you keep that bead active and wet, then you can actually add to your wash as you move further down. I've allowed some of that to get a little bit lighter in the middle, and I've added a little bit more at the top as well to come down. So I've got this beautiful transition, but I've got different areas in the water. It just makes for a little bit more of a variety in the sea. It's not a flat wash. So here I've added a little bit more indigo to the mix and a little bit of green, and I'm using green and magenta. It is a wonderful dark color, but it shifts the blue in the sea to this deeper, darker value, adding a little bit of orange into that as well, just making the whole thing rest down at the bottom of the page. And what happens by doing that, it actually supports the whole painting, the picture plane. While it's still damp, I felt that I needed to come over with a little bit more color. So I actually went for more phthalo green, and I felt that that actually helped me an awful lot. A little bit of magenta went into it as well, and some blues. Now I'm using a paintbrush, soft round brush, just to lift out. I've got water on the brush, but it's dampened and a lot of the excess water taken out, of course, so that I can just lift the pigment that I've already put on in that wash. So it started to dry, although it is not actually totally dry, but it does allow me to lift the pigment and retain some of that paper albeit slightly stained, but a little bit of that paper before I move on, and that way I preserve the lights and the contrast later in those wings. And that really is important. I could have masked it all out, but it does mean to say that there's a lot more trouble with hard edges, and I wanted them to be fairly soft, and so that was quite important. Now I'm just going to literally put some water on my fingers and throw it all over the paint. It's not quite dry yet, but this is adding to the splash. Well, it's not splash. I wanted to create little light effects in the distance as it dries. Now I'm going to let this whole thing dry off, and that's what I've done. We're going to move forward. You can see the effect of what happened when I let the water go on. It pushed all those areas of color away and created what in a sense is a little bit like bokeh or a little bit of a splash. It's nothing one way or the other, but it does look quite effective. I'm testing my colors. I'm putting a little bit of blue and magenta and the green together to give me some darker areas within the water. I'm going to be suggesting little areas of wavelets in the distance. Now they're going to be very, very soft in the distance, but they're going to get a little stronger as they come forward. I'm testing my colors, adding a little bit more and a little bit more, a little bit of orange. I'm spraying over the water area. I'm not really worried about the bird that I lifted the pigment from, because it is protected and I can actually go back in and lift again if I wanted to on areas where I've gone over, like the top of the feathers there at the very top there. But all I'm doing is suggestive. I'm not actually trying to paint waves. I'm just giving a sense of movement in the water with the shadowy sides or the deeper sides of the water. And as it's a little wet, a little damp from the spray bottle, it is actually spreading to some degree. Now I've added more magenta and maybe a little bit of orange into that green mix to make a deeper, darker mix, warmer and cooler in different places. And it's a lot deeper as I get down towards the bottom of the picture. All I'm doing now is simply using a damp brush to soften the edges on the areas of the waves way back in the top of the painting, or what would be the furthest distance away from the bird itself. I'm literally just softening the edges and getting rid of hard edges. I've also just reinstated those wings, lifting out a little bit of pigment where I went through that area. Now it's getting a little bit more interesting. I'm starting to put in some darker values, some lovely greens, but this time there is magenta, there's a bit of red, and there's a bit of orange into those mixes, shifting it totally off the green. And by using the green and the reds, it's complementary. Therefore I'm making grays, but I'm making color grays, and I'm making more suggestions of ripples and waves, especially where the birds just dived into the water there to try and catch a fish. Obviously it missed, and it's sort of rising out, and probably another foot or so up out of the water, it will do a really vigorous shake and get all the water droplets off its body and wings, and then it will go on up into the air and start looking for another fish to attack. But this is where it's just hit the water, missed, and it's just lifting off again. Now here I'm just putting in a little bit of darker mark. I wanted a stronger edge to that wing to show off the wing against the highlights of the wing later on. I hadn't quite got it dark enough, but you have to be very careful. I needed to be really careful. I've just let the whole painting dry, and now I'm using a paper tissue to protect the surface from being able to rest my hand on the paper without leaving any grease. I'm testing my water, my colors again, trying to get in a very soft blue using a bit of ultramarine violet and a little bit of ultramarine itself. Very, very soft, very, very weak solution of paint and water ratio, bit like very weak tea. But it will just give a sense of stain over that wing area and that bit of shade on the wing. A little bit extra going in just where the wing touches the other wing, giving a little bit more depth, a little more sense of depth and roundedness to the feather marks themselves. I've also added in a little bit of raw sienna here, a little bit of yellow, just to give a yellowish, warmish, greenish, grungy color, I suppose, really. But it is a lovely color, but it does give a different accent to the temperature on the bird. You've got a lot of cool colors in the whole picture. You know, all the sea and everything we've done so far is pretty cool. But now we're putting a bit of warmth into it by adding in this raw sienna into our mixes. But I've also put in a little bit of indigo there just to push it back a little bit in places to the cooler color. And I'm just indicating some of the larger flight feathers with a darker mix. Now the idea of those lower feathers and the wing that have got those little light stripy marks, that's not on the wing themselves. That's where two feathers cross each other on the wing itself and create a little shadow area. That's what you're seeing, because you're actually looking at light pumping through those wings beyond, and that's what I needed to preserve. Here I'm just adding in a few darks on the lead edge of the wings going up to the primary feathers, and a little bit of ultramarine blue coming into the top of the body, coming down into the tail, adding a bit more indigo and a little bit more ultramarine blue to give a darker accent to the more shadowy section under the tummy and up to the throat of the bird across the top of the head. Now don't forget, the head is masked at the top to preserve the white, as is part of the beak. I'm adding more of the blues and a little bit darker with indigo and maybe a little bit of magenta in there just to give me that dark into the beak, which I can work on later on. I'm looking at the dark shadowy areas under the tail as well, and we are really working well. It's going nicely and I'm really happy with the results so far. But all the time I'm checking, I'm looking, I'm turning the picture onto its side so that I can more easily work on the very fine detail of those wing flights. They're predominantly dark. Now this is dark, but it's not as dark as some of the area on the wings closest to me. So I've allowed it to be dark, but I've actually taken it back probably a little bit, so it's a little bit lighter, and it of course will dry much lighter than it is going down. It's damp at the moment and it will sort of fade back as it goes forward, but I'm just changing the length of that flight. I found that it wasn't quite long enough in the drawing, so I've actually increased it a little bit, and I think that works, and I think it's a little bit more of a striking pose, and splitting those wing flights up, where you can see it's just lifted up, they're quite wet and they're split open and they're not together as it were, and it just makes for a dynamic pose with the bird. And I think, to me, terns are about those long pointy heads, their lovely sharp wings and those beautiful tails. They're so graceful in the air. With everything else done, the picture's turned back over now, and what I'm doing is putting in the finer details. That lovely black head stripe that these terns have. I must look up what the name of these terns are, but mine's got a very yellow tip to the beak. So if you do know what it is, and if I can't find out what it is, and you know what it is, then put it in the comments underneath the video. I'd love to know exactly what the subspecies of this tern is. But I'm putting in that detail, and I'm just putting in the legs now. The leg on one side, the nearest one to me, you can see it goes up into the body, but the other leg that goes down to meet this one, actually they join, sort of visually they join, but on the other side of the body, of course, it must not encroach the body, otherwise it will not look right. But the legs are down, you can, it just works. Adding more detail now to areas of the feathers and the wings to give that extra sense of light in the wing feathers themselves. And the reason that is, if I add darker colors to those wings, all the light areas suddenly look a lot lighter. Now for the fun bit. This is where I took all the masking fluid off. The painting has dried thoroughly. Please make sure thoroughly. Even the bird was left to dry thoroughly because there was masking fluid over the area. And one thing, when you're doing it, don't have your paint box next to when you're doing it. It will spring everywhere and you'll contaminate and put bits into your wet colors, and that's the last thing you want to be forever picking out rubberized masking fluid from your painting box. Now I'm using a rich phthalo green with some orange, a little bit of red in there as well, to give me the darker shadowy reflective accents of the water. As the ripples are coming down, they're putting deeper shadowy marks. It's not just white splats of masking fluid that have been taken away and leaving white paper. Now we have to model those little areas so that we can actually give a sense of form and shape. And there's that little mark down there that I made a mistake with some masking fluid. I'm covering that out now and giving it less presence. I think it wasn't perfect, but it actually did work out quite well. Okay, so there's not really a great deal left to do on this painting. There is a bit more to do on the bird, and we'll get to that very shortly. But the area that I'm working on at the moment is all this area of white, the splashes, all those little bits of dripping water or water that's been forced into the air. And I want to give them 3 dimensions, and I'm doing that by changing the different green color values that I'm using. It's all phthalo green, but some of it's got more water with it than others, so that when you tap it down, you get areas that will dry much paler and almost the stain, and some that are very, very dark. And by doing that, by varying those marks, you are indeed actually giving a sense of 3 dimensions. As I get lower down, I'm giving a bit more of a dark area, just so that that's where there's more depth of color, more reflection surfaces away from the sunlight, all these things, just trying to give it a bit of realism, making sure that when you look at it, it does look like a splash. It looks like the bird's just crashed into the water and is lifting out. But we are pretty much done. All I've got to do now when I finish this area is just refine the head and the beak area and put that lovely white, that lovely yellow accent to the bird itself. So that's what I'm looking to do, and I'm just going to work on the area. Now I got a little bit loud or a little bit heavy with the masking fluid, so it wasn't as smooth when I took it off as I'd hoped. So I'm just going back in and putting a little bit of the green color very, very carefully. I'm putting a bit on, lifting some off. I don't want the water in the paint to push ahead and create an awful stain there. So I've got to be very, very careful. But I was, and it worked, and I was lucky. But you can see how carefully I'm doing it. But at the end of the day, I got the shape of the head right. I left the lovely light on the top of the head, and now I've just turned it around to give a better angle to paint the beak in, and it's predominantly all dark, but the lovely yellows with Indian yellow to start with and the cadmium yellow just on the tip of the beak brought this painting to a conclusion. So that was it, that's done, and just a few last marks I've seen on the water again, just to add just that little bit more. And this is what I call the I's and T's. This is where I'm just going over, my eyes are scanning everything, and yeah, just a bit more detail on the head that I've seen around the eye, making sure the eye angle and shape looks about correct. And here we go, that lovely yellow, Indian yellow, just to give it a beautiful stain. I've left that very pale on the end there so I can get this in. Really important because it pretty much denotes the subspecies, I'm sure. Painting's done. I'm happy, I'm signing it, and I don't ever like making a big heavy signature. I like to try and put it in an area that it doesn't cause the viewer to look straight at the signature. And I never try and put it in a position like the bird's moving from left to right, so I wouldn't sign it on the right. I put it behind the bird so the bird can move straight into its area of where it's going. Painting's done. I hope you've enjoyed it. I have had a lot of fun doing this. I really have. And I look forward to catching you all in the next video. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye. Okay, everybody, one turn done. I had a heap of fun painting this little tern from Florida, and I hope you enjoyed it, and I'm sure you got something from it you can take on in your own paintings in the future. Don't forget, the reference will be on my Patreon for you to freely download, so long as it's not for commercial use, and enjoy and have a go at this project yourselves. And on the subject of enjoying, if you did enjoy the video, then please give it a massive thumbs up. And if you're not a subscriber, click the subscribe button and click the bell icon. All of those things cost you nothing. But the thing is, you really are helping my channel grow, and you're telling YouTube that it's worth pushing out to more people so more people can enjoy and learn how to paint in watercolor. So that would be fantastic if you would do that. And what else am I going to say? Well, I don't want, oh yes, comments. If you've got a thought, if you've got ideas and thoughts that you'd like to see me cover in future videos, then please put them in the comments section. I love reading them. I love interacting with you guys, and it tells me your thoughts of the sort of subject matter you'd like to see covered. So put them there, and I will see if I can accommodate you in the future. So in the meantime, it just remains for me to say happy painting, everybody. Stay safe wherever you are. I'll catch you all in the next video. Take care. Bye-bye. I went across the pond to America and do a bird. Start again. Hi everybody, and welcome back to the Watercolor channel. And in today's episode, now I've got the dogs barking, and I thought I would do something for the subscribers that I enjoy from America, and I wanted to paint one of their native terns off of nearby. No, start again. Hi everybody, welcome back. Now, as said at the start, I wanted to do something that was for... Start again. Okay everybody, one turn. No, my turn. Your turn? Certainly could be our turn. Start again.